taking time out on your Sunday to be here with us to celebrate the release of the newest book by Ron Seybold. So I'm going to introduce Ron, and then Ron will read. A lot of you have already purchased the book. Thank you so much. If you haven't, or if you want more, the books are available on the table over there. And I'm sure if you ask nicely, Ron would be happy to sign. So, Ron Seybold is the author of the memoir, Stealing Home, and the novel, Viral Times. He directs the Writers' Workshop in Austin, a place for workshopping and creativity groups. A teaching volunteer at the Austin Batcave Literacy Program in schools, he coaches writers, edits books, and plays a part in helping authors from inspiration to publication. Please welcome Ron Seybold.
Thank you, everyone. This is the most exciting day that any book can have, in part because it's surrounded by love. Thank you for being here, for finding a parking space, for volunteering to walk out through the heat when we're done. It's just absolutely special. Before I get going here, I want to be sure that we give a big shout out for Malvern Books. Gem and a treasure here in Austin, a one-of-a-kind place. Thank you to Joe and Becky and Celia and Stephanie. The whole staff makes this work here. You find really extraordinary stuff inside these walls. Please come back and find something special you won't dig up anywhere else. With that said, let's get started. So I'm going to read 4 sections today, and I promise I'll try and keep it under 20 minutes. So. I'm waiting for the hook, right? Introductions. The lights are winking out at Kaufman Field in Kansas City as I shift in the seat of our rented convertible. I'm trying to find the way out of the parking lot, but my mind isn't firing on all cylinders. 10 hours of driving already from Texas to get my son and me up here on a hot July Saturday night. Then 9 innings of even more sitting. Now I have to find the hotel. Sweat collects on the inside of my ball cap as I realize I have no clue where I'm going. It's not my first time in this parking lot, just my first time here when I wasn't high. 14 summers after my night of that Willie Nelson show in KC. One that ended wrestling my sleepless mania as I clutched a kitchen knife, paranoid from too much pot. My 11-year-old son, Nicky, sits with me in the convertible. This trip is supposed to prove I am not running from my fatherly duty after a divorce and court-managed custody. My summer visitation vacation will be just the 2 of us, and I have 13 more nights to take care of him on my own. I am committed to being a better father than my dad was for me. Fatherhood without anger can't be so hard. Not so hard that a man would have to kill himself because he failed it. Like Dad did in the same year I sat in this parking lot for the first time. The sound of the crowd milling in the lot turns rowdy while the dashboard clock ticks toward midnight. It is 1994, so there is no phone in our car to check for hotel directions. I flip my AAA triptych pages forward and then back. I squint in the dashboard light at the map's red and black lines, and then I pull out a Rand McNally baseball atlas, skim with alarm at the Kansas City Royals entry. These maps are my guardrails for traveling across 11 different states to see 9 games in only 11 days. I lower our Pontiac Sunbird's top to study the maps. Do you know the way? Nicky asks. I assured him unconvincingly that I do. I set out to find our hotel in the dark, conscious of my untreated anxiety issues. I need to locate safety before the pounding in my chest takes over. Nicky believes in me more than I believe in myself. I am driven to be the man he thinks I am. The July wind helps me take a breath. The lights in the lot lead us to a sign that promises a freeway. The ramp hides in the dark, though, with the glare of the light shining off my glasses and blocking my vision to the left and the right. I eke across 2 streets, stop at a light, and then turn left toward the sound of the interstate. Just get to I-70, I say to myself, and then we'll be all right. I drive underneath the interstate, though, and scan the streets to the left and the right. Where's that ramp? I sit up straighter and slow the car. Nicky slides down in the seat as we enter the gritty streets of what I'd have called the ghetto when I was his age. Hooded heads swivel at the two white guys entering the neighborhood in a convertible, cutting through the soundtrack of a Saturday night. We stop at a light, and Nicky knows the biggest mistake first. Dad? He's fading on me. Yeah, what? We're in the hood and wearing bandanas. I brought them to keep the sweat out of our eyes during the game. We might be wearing colors, Dad. I'd force a laugh. A real parent wouldn't drive into the worst part of town wearing something that dangerous. A real parent wouldn't bring his son to a street full of drunks lined with razor wire. My anxious self careens straight into the clutch of dread. My stupidity is going to get us jumped, carjacked, killed. I keep the car moving, not stopping to roll up the top or the windows. I don't even stop at the red light. As I roll through that light, I see two cops in a patrol car just shake their heads, watching me try to steal away home for the night with my son. So you can't write a book about fatherhood and sons without a tip of the hat to your father. And there is a great deal of I remember Dad when throughout the book. After we go to Cleveland together, Nicky and I, to see a ball game, we're walking the street, and I smell a bit of sawdust in the air as they finish a deck that they're building out on Euclid. And the sawdust takes me back. Sawdust surrounded my dad on the days that I loved him easily enough to kiss him. His garage was Dad's Saturday empire. Once he began to get his days off weekends instead of midweek. There were many things in his life he could not control, but the garage's array of metal and wood let him exercise his powers of absolute domain. On one side of the garage, the shopsmith hovered on its four metal legs. Each leg had a wheel that could be locked down, and upon those legs sat a table saw, a drill press, a router and a lathe, a bandsaw, a sander, all powered by the same electrical engine. On many Saturday mornings, it commanded the center of the one-car garage, but on weeknights, it idled beside the Plymouth Fury. Although the car was wide like a 70s classic, Dad always parked it cleanly, never nearing the Leviathan of the shopsmith. He parked his Fury with precision, without any help of painted lines on the floor or a tennis ball dangling off a cord from the ceiling. The Fury was the biggest sedan ever to park in the garage, but its back bumper never failed to be tucked inside the door. The tools hung on the pegboard with handles he painted green, covering up the previous generation of orange. He took them on after his dad died. The vise mounted at the end of the bench was brushed clean and oiled, the cloying scent of 3-in-1 hovering around the aroma of just cut lumber. While I stand beside him, he cut that lumber, a hobby carpenter who could build rough furniture and cabinets or cut paneling for the basement walls. Dad let me hold the loose end of the wood he was cutting finally, giving in after he told me for a half an hour to stay back from the power saws. He worked in trousers, no matter what the season. Nobody builds in Bermuda shorts, Ronnie. A man wears pants. The chains rolled around in the pockets of the beige working man's trousers, pants with the same belt that he'd wear to his job with dress pants. He moved between the workbench and the shopsmith, back and forth like a dancer, measuring and drawing lines across 2x4s with the pencil he tucked behind his ear while he cut. Up and down the street, the sounds of such garage enterprise filled backyards on Saturdays after the good cartoons were over. I loved the sawdust part of it. He was at his best when he worked in front of us, especially if it was a task that had little at stake. When he'd repair something in that garage, the lightning strike of his anger could bolt out at some object that defied a tool, a slipped screwdriver or a bent nail hood would uncork a spume of swearing, from the garden variety, goddammit, to the nuclear warhead of son of a bitch. The anger wasn't lashed at my brother or me in those moments of high drama, though. We'd back away a little, but then he'd cool down and retake control with a little lecture. Now this Phillips head is stripped out, so we gotta use the channel locks to get the damn thing out of the wood, he explained. Yeah, I see. And you tighten it all up with this screw on the bottom handle of the vice grip here. He spun the tiny wheel. See? Great, Dad. You probably do this when you got boys, too. I sure hope so. Just don't have them too early, he said, as he pushed his hair back. Wait a while. Okay. I did the math while I watched him. He was 41 during that summer of '68 in the garage, old enough to be a hero to me on that day. I felt warmth in my gut while I got close to him and held the end of the board he was cutting. Just loose now. Don't force it. I'm cutting. You're holding. Sure, Dad. I wanted to be a sawdust dad for Nikki, not a crazy blade. So at this point, we've had 9 games under our belt already, all scheduled games. We are now at our 10th game somehow. It is unscheduled. And with us is my wife, who's joined us for this last game of the trip. Rangers versus Angels, July 28, 1994, 25 years to the day. By the time the sweltering night dipped below 90, the Angels' futility was complete up to that moment. The bip-bop got passed around from my lap to Nikki's and back. He was balancing on his knees, with his feet resting on the seat in front of him. The big crowd made the night even hotter, but the breeze in the air brought a blessing as the wind shifted from left field to right. I looked up at the scoreboard above the home run porch. Lights glared over that board, and I started to scan its numbers. Zeros. So many for these last place Angels. I felt a creep of electricity in my legs, damped against the green plastic of my chair. Hey, I said to Nikki, let me see that scorebook. Sure, he said, still affable during our enforced sweltering. As he handed it across, he looked up at the board. I watched him sizing up the board. See it? A no-no, yeah, no hitter, wow. There's more. I handed him the book back. Hey, no walks for them either. No errors either, I said in the quietest voice I could manage. A perfecto, he said. What? Oh my, said my bride. Perfect game, so far. Perfect games are so rare in Major League Baseball, they might as well be two-headed cows born in a blizzard. They call them perfectos, and on that night, they'd only been achieved 13 times over more than 210,000 games across 125 years in baseball. The perfect game is 9 innings of absolute order, but it's impossible to find on a schedule. Fate and good fortune rules who can be in the stands. One team sends one man after another to the plate. They all fail to reach base safely. 27 up, 27 down, in a perfecto, the batters all get no farther than first, and any who even make it there get thrown out. Some do not leave home plate, stopped by strikeouts. None of the 9 fielders makes an error on such a night of perfection. The odds of being in our seats to see one? Well, you need 6 decimal places. A perfecto is so uncommon that by that night there were 3 times as many presidents elected as perfect games played. We were watching a total absence of offense on an impulse. I bought seats for 9 innings of baseball that had a growing chance to be a perfect game. Every one of the other hundreds of thousands of games started out with the same chance. They're all perfect for a while. An official perfect game emerges out over a long cycle of actions, nurtured by luck and daring those odds. I was taking my own long shot at 2 weeks of happiness using 11 hotel nights to see 8 ballparks, all of which I'd never tried to find in thick traffic or the dark of the night. Every check-in, every fill-up, every quarter pounder we discovered in the right place at a time to fit our schedule, every parking place we found or subway train caught, they were all individual plays in our larger game. 2 weeks of road tripping with Nikki might amount to a string of disappointments, as the experience fell short of my expectation. Because when the mustard is too spicy, or the game is played in a drizzle, or your team doesn't win, that's not perfect. I thought we'd found perfection in Chicago at Wrigley. The friendly confines there was my exacting destination, the turnback point for our journey. Wrigley was planned, something I could reach for, and then later on, burnish like a cup pulled down off of a mantle. Being in those hot seats at the ballpark in Arlington was something far different. The baseball gods were giving me a tease, a hint this trip could end on an even higher note. It was something I didn't dare wish for, but also a thing I desired more than anything. Perfect game would be a historic sign. I was meant to be more than a weekend dad. No pressure for me, just come home with a perfect game, so you can call it a perfect trip with your son. And like all good sagas do, we fast forward to more of the modern day here. We get to see what happens when the next generation arrives. I sit on the bleacher plank and watch the little 6-year-old on the field. He is small for his age, just like I was and like Nicky was. Noah's white baseball pants crowd the tops of athletic shoes, while his Astros jersey hangs loose off his slight shoulders. But my grandson Noah, chip off the old block, holds his chest high as he stands in the on-deck circle. He swings his bat in practice strokes. This is his first T-ball game, the year when nobody plays perfect, and everybody is happy. He wears a jersey with only his first name on the back, and no hits yet in his short life. I balance a scorebook on my knees, making marks on another set of blue-lined pages with their boxes, and I measure my own progress. I've sat here before, keeping score in front of a Seybold son. Tonight, Noah's daddy shows off the things that I see him passing on to his little boy: confidence, laughter, and the ease of the certainty that knows the way to happiness. Nicky has grown to become Nick, his chipper chin of an 11-year-old, now filled out to a man's jawline in his 30s. His tousled locks now trimmed to a haircut that's as short as a golf course green. He volunteers for Noah's team wearing the garb of success, family. We've traveled far to get here, all of us, to this ballpark debut of the little boy I call Seybold 4.0. I like the sound of that, like a high grade, a fresh place after Dad and me, and then Nick, and finally Noah. Nick now has his dad in the stands while he watches his little boy's debut. 3 generations at one ball game, our first for my family. Like my dad, Nick has fathered his own 2 boys, but he is a better dad than me, a fella he's come to call Pop. I like the name, the casual love it carries. Nick's been enriched by fatherhood. He can span the needs of his 2 boys, youngsters more than 3 years apart, during those afternoons when he plays with them both in the backyard. Tonight, Nick keeps score for his son's team just as I did, but then he hands his scorebook to me, his sometimes wild father, so he can coach out on the field. Although I am an older man of more than 60, I'm still a young grandfather, new to the part. That's a role Dad never played, taking himself out of the game while still short of this joy. Noah takes a swing at the teed-up ball, and with a clank of the bat, he runs fast and short like his grandpa and his father, churning toward a spot of bag. and beams at the applause and cheers from parents and friends, a group of mothers and fathers and siblings who I am certain that I belong with. I don't doubt that, not like I did in that Little League springtime with Nicky. Perfection comes delivered by good fortune, not a thing that can be captured by any compulsive plan. I can be secure, even though I've had many game days as an unsure father. Noah is shining in the night's moment. His very first is a bright star in a galaxy of teammates. They back him up. When he steals the next base and the next, he runs as part of a team, carrying the desires of his mates. When he stops to stand on each base, beaming at the cheers on his first sports night, it feels different to me, while it is brand new to him. His daddy ran these base paths in Austin, where I watched him from the scorer's table, sure of my place there at least. I now look over to my son, who's returned to the game that I loved first as a boy, the game of order and tradition and rituals. I wrote down every play of Nicky's team in his Little League season in the Bibfolk, trying to use his plays to prove I was a man good enough to be an accomplished dad. As a young father, a man of divorce and then remarriage, I took wild swings. During that summer road trip season with Nicky, I started to lift safer hits into the field of life. And now we come to the real fun, the impromptu, the questions that I hope you will ask about baseball or the story or how in the world this thing ever got written.
So how did you come to love baseball?
Ah, yes. So I came to love baseball because the Cincinnati Reds were a World Series contender team, and they were not my father's Detroit Tigers. I was 13 and clearly remember getting on the high school bus in October of 1970 going, wow, there's a team in the World Series, and it's not the Tigers. Of course, I got lucky because this was the 1970s team of the Cincinnati Reds, big red machine.
Yeah.
Power, speed, and pretty much a brand new ballpark.
So what was the perfecto game? Who were the teams?
So that was the Rangers and the Angels,
Oh, okay.
and that was, I read us up to the point where we went, hey, this might be a perfect game. They almost had one a week ago. A pitcher went into the ninth. And what I was telling Abby as I came down here is I said, you know, they took a perfecto into the ninth. And she said, and did he get it? And I said, when you say he took it into the ninth, it means he didn't get it. It was a gem. He tossed a 98 pitch shutout, but there was one hit in the ninth. Tomorrow could be another. Every game starts out perfect. Who else?
So, Ron, did you find your perspective, fatherhood or your own childhood, shifting at all as you wrote? Did the writing change the way you thought about, and you don't have to share anything too personal, but did you find that shifting as you went along?
Absolutely it did. I had forgiveness from my father before I began this. I couldn't have even thought of writing it without that. But the more that I made those scenes happen and remembered the details in there, and the more I could compare to the places that I was at as a father, the deeper that forgiveness became.
Did it change the story? The internal story?
I had to set things aside after I went through a good edit, and I missed the things that I set aside. So I think as I was writing it, I was being extremely inclusive. I wanted all these stories. They all felt like they had weight to me and meaning. And that's why you send it out to somebody else, so they can give you that realistic look at what really is working. And what I said as well, that's all saved for the next book.
So did Nikki know you were writing this when you started to write it, and what does he know? What does he think now? Has he read it?
He certainly knows I've been writing it, because when he says, "Dad, what's up?" I say, "Yeah, I'm all the way to chapter 9, or I'm writing about Cleveland now." And I would ask him as we sat and talked at lunch, I go, "So what do you remember about Cleveland?" And he goes, "Jim Tomei," you know. He's like, "We had burgers." It was like, you know, he wasn't as much help as I wanted him. Now that it is written, he's enjoying it. He hasn't finished it because he, of course, is processing this with the depth of emotion of someone who was there.
Yeah.
What I've told him is, it'll be there for you whenever you're ready.
Thank you.
So there are two kinds of people in the world. There are people who like baseball and also probably know baseball, and there are people who don't. So how did you approach, or what were you thinking about writing this, realizing you didn't want to limit your audience just to the baseball?
This has had several seasons. The first season was, I intend to explain baseball to you so everyone can get the game. Yes, that was not as successful as I hoped. I had a wonderful memoir group that I was leading to workshop this, and some of them said, "No, I don't get that. You need to cut it out." The other person said, "Oh, you did that well." I'm like, "Okay, what do I do? What do I do?" Finally, I decided that I was not going to explain baseball, so that seemed like the easy choice. But I wasn't going to leave out any of the detail, the lingo, basket catch, suicide squeeze, chin music. All of the details of the game I was going to leave in there, and I was just going to write enough fatherhood and parenthood that you could skim over that baseball. Or vice versa, I suppose. As I like to say, maybe you come for the baseball and stay for the fatherhood.
In the days before, Google Maps and all that, how did you plan this project?
Compulsively and without any regard for success. I was certain. What's that?
What was the question?
Oh, she wanted to know how I managed to plan this out in an era without Google Maps and smartphones and everything. So as you might guess, I do sort of look forward in life. And so I could imagine every stop and every road and every turn. And I had the best maps that money could buy. And mostly I think what I had was no concept of this ever failing in a way that would stop the whole thing. Not while I was proposing. Just last week, I revisited 4 cities out of this baseball tour. And so I did it with the technology and the assurance of 2019. And when I got done, I saw 36 innings of baseball in 72 hours. So I meant to keep up the breakneck pace that I did originally. And when I finally collapsed in bed at the end of the 4th night, I went, how did I ever do this? And everybody says, yeah, Ron, well, you're only 37. And I'm like, a great answer, a great answer. And I think, of course, I had a lot at stake. And it seems that way from the way the story has unfolded. I didn't want to let myself fail. Ernie.
About how long do you think that this took you to write, from like concept to now?
Concept, the first part of it came down in about a month, but I only got as far as the first Ranger Stadium game. And then I went, oh, this is just a travelogue. I don't know what this means exactly. It was glorious, yeah, there was a perfect game, but the bigger meaning here, for the non-baseball fan, for me, I had to set it aside. It was another 10 years before I even started getting serious about it. I led a memoir group, and then there was another group, and Mom died. And that's when I knew I had to begin to write. Because the stories were gone with her. That was 6 years ago. The whole process to be able to get it in front of an editor probably took about 4 years. I was writing another book at the same time. I don't recommend that. That one will be finished next. So altogether 6 years, I think, when I really got serious about it.
I've got a better answer for you, Ron. How old are you?
No.
62.
It took him 62 years.
Very good, exactly so. Yes.
I noticed that in the beginning, in your introduction, you keep everything in the present tense. Are there other parts of the book when you use that method of staying in the present tense as opposed to I took, I did, it happened?
Very good question. In the draft that the editor saw, much of it was in present tense. As soon as we got to a game setting, it was in present tense. We pulled all that back. We pulled that back into past tense. We didn't want the present tense to yank you so far out of your chair that you couldn't settle back into the deeper meaning of what was being written. So the present tense only returns at the end.
At the end?
Yes, with
Yeah.
Melanie.
I think that's a wise decision on your part. Sometimes when books are solidly in the present tense, I just get, I don't care for it. I think it's good to use it in certain parts where you really want it to feel like this is happening now, right now.
I so admire the energy of any author who can keep that up for 60 or 70 or 80,000 words. I mean, there are other things that people do with books that are remarkable too. It felt like the right choice once I finally saw what the editor had done.
Your prose is sharp and descriptive and wonderful. So,
Thank you.
Yes, it is.
John.
One thing, non-writing related.
Yes.
What was the date of the game that you attended?
This one here, that's the July 28, 1994.
I think you missed a perfect game with 10 days. Kenny Rogers pitched a perfect 4-0 game against the Angels.
It was on that day.
What's the game?
On the back,
Okay.
there's a ticket. I'm way bad about throwing things away.
Your favorite ball player?
Out of all of them, everybody who we saw, you know, the guy who was the flashiest was still Ozzie Smith, who ran onto the field as a St. Louis Cardinal. His trademark was to do a somersault as he dropped on. Kirk Gibson, because he was an old guy and he brought everybody to their feet, recalling that glory that he had just a few years earlier as a Los Angeles Dodger, and it was a taker out of there.
So, as I understand it, and I haven't read the book, speaking to writers that might be here, what I get is two passions drove you: baseball and fatherhood. And so if we are approaching something and want to write about it as writers, would you say that's part of the formula, the passion?
Absolutely, it can be a formula. And I think it can take you into storytelling that you might not know is inside of you. As people who love stories, and all of us do, and as people who make stories, and many of us do, we are always looking for relationships, how things connect. The associations are what makes things interesting. I'm lucky I love baseball, which, as it turns out, has got a lingo almost everybody understands on each, at least a little level. Everybody knows what home plate is. Everybody knows what safe is. So finding those things and trying to map them onto the things that happened in my childhood and my fatherhood with Nikki, it became a joy, a game. And I was pleased to discover at the end that I hadn't overplayed that card too much.
You've mentioned the phrase deeper meaning several times. So what is the deeper meaning? What has been the deeper meaning for you in writing this book?
Great question. So you have to write 65,000 words to get to the point where you begin to believe that you know the deeper meaning, or I did anyway. The deeper meaning is to have faith that whatever comes along might be better than what you planned compulsively. That the universe is out there to give you something better than you thought you had worked so hard to get. And that the world is forgiving. And if you've made mistakes along the way, you can redeem yourself and you maybe don't have to travel 3,147 miles to do it. And finally, the one thing at the end is I go, as I say in the end here, I say, when it happens with family, it's always better. It's close to perfect. And it helps if you get there by first pitch. Anybody else? You go.
Growing up in a divided Chicago household.
Oh! Cubs and White Sox.
Always has to be asked.
Yes.
Are we blue and red, or are we black and white?
Yes.
Are we Chicago Cubs, or are we the White Sox?
Yeah. Well, and there's been tremendous change up there because I went to a White Sox.
Sorry.
White Sox fan. You two guys can sort this out.
Surprised he's not wearing his t-shirt.
Rock, paper, scissors, right? 2 out of 3? No, because I was just at Wrigley a week ago today, and boy has it changed. There's nothing like the first World Series win in 108 years to give you some swagger.
Yeah. I got a copy beer in the back of my car.
What do you think your dad would have thought of this book?
He would have been proud. He would have found some things that I should have done better. Because that's just how Dad rolled. But I think he would have admired the dark humor in it, the sardonic wit, the self-deprecation and honesty, I think, because that was inside of him all the time. He was his harshest critic, as they say. So to watch me examine this, and to tell all these stories and I'm not the hero in a lot, I think he would have resonated with that.
How do you, I know I have a particular relationship with a member of my family that I have a great deal of trouble forgiving, and they certainly me, but how do you think your father was ever able to forgive himself, or did you feel like he had something to forgive you for? I know you forgave him.
And it's part of the book. He did forgive me, and I forgave him. He extended it first. I wanted to be an actor. He thought that was crazy. I went into the Army down here in Texas to pay for the GI Bill to pay for that. And he saw me hang on to it, and he sent me a cassette letter. You probably remember when we used to do those, right? And he had this line where he said, you know that acting thing? He said, I think you ought to try that out. And it was in that moment I loved him as purely as a dog loves his master. Always forgiven, because all he had to do was show me he believed in my dream. Time for one more?
I have a question. I think that the title is just so spot on, because I think it's so much bigger and so close to your own. Because home is, it's a home story. It's about, and do you steal home, or does it live within you? You have to go chase it, and it's very, very powerful. I love it. And my other one is just a logistics one. How did you get done, and when did you know you were finished? Because, you know, like all of us, we start, slave, and then are we done, How did you finish, I guess?
I had some.
How did you help?
I had some luck, in a sense, because I always felt like this book should come out today. And when you have a date in history, when you're celebrating 25 years later, you know you better be done. I say I started this book for Nikki, and indeed I did. And I worked at it hard. But I finished it for Noah. So he could know 1.0 and 2.0 and even some of 3.0 that he didn't know about. I knew I was finished when I could find the end, and the end wound up coming when Noah came to the plate, and I went, and that's it. And that's where we can see this trip around the base paths lead, and you can see home plate.
Don't be afraid of admitting the fact that you wrote it for you.
Absolutely.
Yeah.